we're here in the training room for K2 talking about rail best practices and specifically cantilevers. So you can see we have two different mounting systems on this one row of modules. We've got the Splice Foot XL at the bottom there and the K2 Flash here at the top. The K2 Flash is strictly a rafter connection only with a 5/16 lag screw, pretty standard for a one hole mount. Whereas the Splice Foot is two smaller screws going into the rafter, and by being two, you can have smaller screws that are self-tapping, and they have just as much strength as a single hole mount like this. The reason I bring this up is because the Splice Foot has the option of deck attachments, and I'll talk about that here in a minute where that's important. But looking at the two cantilevers here, you've got a mount here and a short cantilever there, and then you've got a mount here on the rafter with a fairly large cantilever here. So if you measure across here, this is about 24 inches, just a little bit over 24 inches. And so this is a common mistake that installers get on systems where they automatically default to a 24 or 16-inch cantilever. And the rule is, for most racking systems, is that it's actually a third of the max span between mounting systems on that array. Not on the full system. If there's an array over there, you might have a different wind speed or a different exposure over there. So it's this array, which in this case we have a 4-foot span. So really this cantilever here should be 16 inches because here you got a 4-foot span, and that divided by 3 in inches is going to be 16 inches. So this being 24 is exceeding that limit. So again, it's a third of the max span. So if you're doing 4-foot spans or 6-foot spans, then you can divide that by 3. So if there was a 6-foot span in this array and it was allowed in the design, then the 24 inches would be okay. But we're at a 4-foot span, so 16 inches is the limiting factor here, so this is technically incorrect. Why I bring up the Splice Foot is because the Splice Foot, as you know, or may not know, if you look on our spec sheet and the installation instructions of the Splice Foot, that square has 6 holes going into it, and 2 in the center are for the rafter connection, and the 4 in the corner are for deck attachment options. So where that plays nicely is this case exactly. So there's a rafter here, so we have 2 screws going into the rafter into the center holes. These screws are actually provided in the kit, so it's included. So if you're going to do a deck attachment, you would need additional screws, and you're going 4 into the corner. And in this case, it's a great scenario because this is over 24 inches of cantilever. And so we don't have a rafter in this section, or maybe it's too close to the edge and you might not want to see a mount there. So depending on your wind loads and your wind speeds and your design, you could potentially put in a deck attached Splice Foot here, and the product is designed to have that shelf on the back that goes towards the ridge, and you can technically slip this in underneath and still install it while the rail is in place. So again, the rule for racking systems for cantilevers is a third of the max span on that array. So if you're doing 4-foot span standard, then you're gonna know 16-inch cantilevers is your limit. So that's kind of a good number to keep in mind if you're doing 4-foot spans as a standard. And again, you have the option of different mounting systems that can do rafter and deck. But if you're using the K2 Flash with standard metal flashing, then maybe you want to try out the Splice Foot. But just keep in mind that cantilevers are something that's important. As you can see on this module here, if this cantilever of 24 inches was on this module, that would be a pretty significant, this is 24 inches here, the majority of this module is not supported by a mount. So by putting in a deck attached or rafter, if it's in the area, that's ideal. The deck attached kind of saves you in a bind and gets you a more structural sound racking system and more support for the array itself. So just keep it in mind when you're looking at cantilevers and the different mounting systems that might be best for you in your design and your installation.